Commander Calix stalked through the corridors of the Zethnar battlecruiser, her footsteps echoing against the metal floor. Crew members flattened themselves against walls as she passed, fear evident in their eyes. At 7 feet tall with scaled crimson skin and eyes that glowed like molten gold, Calix had spent 3 decades cultivating her reputation. Merciless, efficient, unstoppable. The detention level's energy barrier pulsed as she approached. The guard snapped to attention. "The human prisoner, Commander," he reported, "continues to resist standard interrogation procedures." Calix's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. "Then it's time for non-standard procedures." The cell door hissed open. Inside sat a human male, bruised but unbowed. Unlike most prisoners, he didn't cower when she entered. Instead, he looked directly into her eyes, a breach of protocol that would have earned most captives immediate punishment. "Eli Bennett," Calix said, her voice like stone grinding against metal. "Your colony's resistance has cost the Dominion significant resources." The human shrugged. "We tend to object to being conquered." "Your objections are irrelevant," Calix replied, circling him slowly. 16 systems have fallen to me personally. Entire species have surrendered at the mention of my name. And yet here I am, not surrendering. Eli's voice carried no trace of fear, only calm defiance. Fascinating how that works. Calix's combat gauntlet hummed as she activated it. "You will provide the location of your colony's central defense grid." "No," Eli said simply, "I won't. Everyone breaks eventually. It is inevitable." "Like your victory over us, that was supposed to be inevitable too." Eli leaned forward. "Maybe your understanding of inevitable needs revision." The comment struck Calix like a physical blow. In 28 cycles of combat, no one had spoken to her with such audacity. "You speak boldly for someone who will die painfully," she growled. "We all die. The question is what we stand for before we do." Eli's eyes held hers. "What do you stand for, Commander, beyond conquest?" The question caught her off guard. Zethnar warriors didn't question purpose, they executed it, strength above all, emotions as weakness, mercy as foolishness. "I stand for the Dominion," she answered automatically. "That's not an answer, that's an evasion." Calix raised her gauntlet, preparing to begin the interrogation in earnest, when the ship's alarm screamed to life. The deck shuddered beneath her feet. "Commander," her second's voice crackled through her neural implant, "we're under attack. Ambush from Alliance forces. 3 warships emerged from the nebula." "Impossible," Calix snapped. "The nebula is impassable." Eli Bennett smiled faintly. "Apparently not." Another explosion rocked the ship, more violently this time. The lights flickered and died, plunging the cell into darkness before emergency illumination bathed everything in blood red. "Hull breach in sections 4 through 9, announced the ship's AI. "Critical systems failing." Calix made a split-second decision. This human knew something about the Alliance's new capabilities. His intelligence value had just increased exponentially. She deactivated his restraints. "You're coming with me." "To be executed somewhere more convenient?" Eli asked, rubbing his wrists. "To survive," Calix replied coldly, "temporarily." As they entered the corridor, chaos reigned. A massive explosion thundered through the ship, knocking both of them against the wall. Calix recovered instantly, but found her path to the command deck blocked by collapsed beams. "Evacuation order initiated," the AI announced. "All personnel to escape vessels." The Zethnar never retreated. The order could only mean one thing: the ship was lost. As they fought their way toward the escape pods, Calix noticed the human keeping pace beside her, even helping a wounded crew member along the way, an act of compassion that seemed absurd in the midst of battle. "Why would you help your enemy?" she demanded as they reached the pod bay. Eli looked at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "Maybe someday you'll understand the difference between an enemy and a person." The words meant nothing to her. But as the escape pod launched into space and the mighty battlecruiser exploded behind them, Calix had the unsettling feeling that her undefeated record wasn't the only thing about to change. The escape pod's warning lights flashed red as it hurtled through the debris field of what had once been Commander Calix's flagship. Inside, the unlikely pair braced against the violent turbulence. "Navigation systems damaged," announced the pod's rudimentary AI. Guidance offline. Emergency landing protocols initiated. Calix accessed the control panel, her scaled fingers moving with practiced precision despite the chaos. The nearest Zethnar outpost is in the Keldor system. If I can override the... An explosion rocked the small vessel, sending Eli crashing into her. She shoved him back with enough force to bruise. "That wasn't debris," Eli said, steadying himself. "They're shooting at us." Through the viewport, Calix spotted an Alliance interceptor, sleek and fast, circling back for another attack run. "They're targeting all escape pods. Standard Alliance protocol." "That's not our protocol," Eli countered, his face hardening. "We don't fire on escape vessels." "Your naivety is why you'll lose this war." Calix punched in emergency codes, attempting to activate the pod's minimal defensive capabilities. Another blast struck them, sending the pod spinning toward the looming planet below, a mottled sphere of green and brown partially obscured by swirling clouds. "Planetary impact in 40 seconds, the AI warned. Calix's eyes narrowed. "Brace for crash landing. If we survive, you'll follow my commands without question." "I survived your interrogation cell. I think I can survive your company a little longer," Eli replied, strapping himself in. The pod tore through the atmosphere, external panels glowing white-hot. Trees rushed up to meet them, an endless emerald canopy. The impact came with a deafening crash, and then darkness. When Calix regained consciousness, acrid smoke filled the pod. She unbuckled herself, ignoring the pain radiating from her shoulder. The human lay motionless in his restraints, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. Her first instinct was to leave him. One less enemy combatant, one less problem. But his intelligence value remained high. That was the only logical reason she cut his restraints and dragged him from the wreckage moments before the pod's power core destabilized in a brilliant flash of blue energy. A quick assessment of their situation confirmed what Calix already suspected. They had crashed on Vermith, a contested border planet. Untamed wilderness stretched in every direction, and both Alliance and Dominion forces maintained hidden bases throughout the region. "We're behind enemy lines," she muttered, scanning the forest canopy for signs of pursuit. Eli groaned, regaining consciousness. He touched his forehead, wincing. "Where are we?" "Vermith, contested territory." Calix checked her weapons, a sidearm with limited charge and her combat gauntlet. Not ideal, but she had conquered worlds with less. "We need to move. Both your people and mine will be tracking the pod's descent." "My people would help us," Eli said, struggling to his feet. Calix's laugh was harsh and metallic. "Your people just shot us down." "That was a mistake. If we find an Alliance patrol, they'll execute me and perhaps you as well for being a collaborator." Calix gathered what supplies had survived the crash. "The nearest Dominion outpost is approximately 80 kilometers northeast. We move now." Eli glanced at the smoking remains of the pod, then at the dense forest surrounding them. "And if I refuse?" "Then stay and die." Calix started walking, not bothering to look back. "The predators on this world hunt by scent. The crash will draw them for kilometers." She counted 17 steps before hearing him follow. A small victory. They moved in silence for hours, Calix setting a punishing pace despite her injured shoulder. The forest grew denser, the twin suns of the Vermith system barely penetrating the canopy. Strange calls echoed through the trees, some animal, some possibly sentient. This world remained largely unexplored by either faction. "We need to find water," Eli finally said, breaking the silence. "And you need to let me look at that shoulder. My physiology is self-repairing." "Not fast enough. You're leaving a blood trail." Calix stopped abruptly, realizing he was right. Crimson droplets marked their path, a rookie mistake she would have severely punished in any of her soldiers. "There's a stream ahead," she acknowledged. "We'll stop briefly." At the stream, Eli insisted on examining her wound, a deep gash where a piece of the pod had sliced through her armor. To her surprise, his touch was sure and clinical. "Combat medic," he explained, seeing her expression. "Before they made me a colony liaison." "Is that why you don't fear me? Medical training." Eli cleaned the wound with water. "I fear what you represent, but you're just a soldier following orders without questioning why." "Questioning weakens resolve," Calix replied automatically. "Or strengthens purpose." He tore a strip from his uniform, binding her shoulder. There, it should hold until your self-repair catches up. Before Calix could respond, a distant sound caught her attention, the distinctive hum of Dominion hover transports. Your people, Eli noted. No, Calix's eyes narrowed. The engine's signature is wrong. Those are Dominion vessels, but they've been modified with Alliance tech. She grabbed his arm. We need cover now. You mean we're being hunted by both sides? Welcome to war, human, Calix said grimly as they melted into the dense undergrowth. The only allies are those fighting beside you at this moment. Remember that. As they crouched in the shadows, watching the vessels pass overhead, Calix found herself in the unprecedented position of depending on a human's cooperation for survival. It was a tactical necessity, she told herself. Nothing more. But when Eli whispered, "I've got your back if you've got mine," she found herself nodding in agreement. A simple battlefield pact that somehow felt more significant than she cared to admit. 3 days in the wilderness of Vermouth had formed a grudging routine between Commander Calix and Eli Bennett. They moved by night under the twin moon's glow, rested during the dangerous heat of day, and spoke only when necessary. The Zethnar commander maintained a punishing pace despite the challenging terrain, her determination unwavering even as patrols from both factions forced frequent detours. We should reach the ridgeline by dawn, Calix stated, her golden eyes cutting through the darkness. From there, I can access the emergency relay station and signal for extraction. Eli, keeping pace despite his fatigue, studied her profile. And what happens to me when your people arrive? You remain a prisoner of the Dominion. After I helped save your life? Twice. He referred to the Predator attack the previous night and the Alliance patrol they'd narrowly avoided the day before. Calix continued walking, her expression unchanged. The battlefield creates temporary alignments of convenience. It doesn't change who we are. And who exactly are you, Commander? Eli asked. Beyond the title and reputation. The question hung between them, unanswered as Calix raised her hand for silence. Ahead, an unnatural glow illuminated the forest. They approached cautiously, crouching behind dense foliage at the edge of a clearing. Below them lay a small settlement, perhaps 50 simple dwellings housing what appeared to be miners. The distinctive ore processing equipment marked them as yttrium extractors, supplying both sides of the conflict with the precious element needed for hyperspace technology. Neutral territory, Calix observed. They supply whoever pays. They're civilians, Eli corrected. There are no civilians in war zones, only assets or obstacles. Eli's response was cut short by the sound of approaching engines. 6 armed skimmers appeared at the settlement's edge, bearing neither Alliance nor Dominion markings. Raiders, Calix identified them immediately. They'll strip the settlement of resources and leave no survivors. They watched as the raiders herded the villagers into the central square. A leader emerged, a hulking Kraxan with cybernetic enhancements glinting in the torchlight. We should help them, Eli said, his hand moving to the blaster they'd salvaged from the crash. Calix gripped his wrist. Tactically unsound, we're outnumbered. So your warrior code only applies when the odds are in your favor. Her eyes flashed dangerously. My code demands victory, not suicide. Sometimes strength isn't about winning battles, Eli challenged. It's about standing for something greater than survival. Below them, a child cried out as raiders began selecting villagers for processing, a euphemism for the slave markets that operated in the lawless regions between territories. Something shifted in Calix's expression, subtle but present. 6 raiders, poorly disciplined, primitive weapons except for their leader. Her voice remained clinical, detached. If we create a diversion on the eastern perimeter, we could neutralize 4 before they organize a response. Eli studied her, surprised. You're suggesting we help. I'm suggesting we eliminate a potential security threat, she replied, but the justification rang hollow even to her own ears. What followed was a swift, calculated assault. Calix moved like a force of nature, her combat skills honed across decades of warfare. But what surprised her was Eli's effectiveness, not through brutality but through precision and tactical awareness. He disabled rather than killed when possible, focused on protecting the villagers rather than eliminating enemies. When the Kraxan leader fired a sonic disruptor at a group of fleeing children, Calix found herself diving into its path, her armor absorbing the blast that would have liquefied their internal organs. The pain was excruciating, but she remained standing, driving her gauntlet through the raider's chest with lethal efficiency. The skirmish ended quickly. The surviving raiders fled, and an eerie silence fell over the settlement. Calix expected fear from the villagers, the typical response to her presence. Instead, a small girl approached, offering a bowl of water. An elder stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of gratitude. "You saved us," he said simply, "both of you." "We neutralized a threat," Calix corrected, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "Nothing more." Later, as the villagers insisted on treating their wounds and offering shelter, Calix found herself watching Eli interact with the children, telling them stories of Earth that somehow made the humans' resistance sound less like defiance and more like courage. "You could have killed all the raiders," she observed when they were alone. "You had clear shots." "Killing isn't always the answer." Eli winced as he rebandaged his arm. "Those raiders were once someone's children too. Desperation drives people to terrible choices." "Weakness drives people to terrible choices," Calix countered, but with less conviction than before. "Is that what you saw today? Weakness?" He gestured toward the gathering of villagers, now celebrating their survival. "They stand together, they protect each other, they rebuild." Calix watched a father lift his daughter onto his shoulders, the child's laughter bright in the night air. Something long dormant stirred within her, a memory perhaps from before her military conditioning of connection rather than conquest. "My people believe strength is measured by what you can destroy," she said quietly. "Yours seems to measure it by what you can protect." "Not just protect," Eli corrected, "what you're willing to sacrifice for." When they departed the next morning, the villagers provided supplies and information about patrols in the region. As they crested the hill, Calix glanced back at the settlement, vulnerable yet enduring, exactly the kind of target she would have once considered strategically insignificant. "Perhaps," she admitted as they continued their journey, "there are forms of strength I have yet to understand." Eli didn't respond, but in the silence between them, something had fundamentally changed. A warrior beginning to see through different eyes, questioning not just her mission, but the purpose behind it. The mountain ridge provided a commanding view of the valley below. Commander Calix knelt at its edge, her enhanced vision scanning the terrain. In the distance, the angular silhouette of a Zethnar communications outpost stood against the horizon, their destination after 7 grueling days in the wilderness. "We'll reach it by nightfall," she informed Eli, who was checking their remaining supplies. "And then," he asked, "I contact my fleet. We return to the war." Her tone was matter-of-fact, but lacked the certainty it had possessed days earlier. Eli studied her face, the proud, alien features that had seemed so threatening when they first met. "Is that what you want, to go back to how things were?" Calix turned sharply. "What I want is irrelevant. I am a warrior of the Dominion." "You're more than that," Eli countered. "I've seen it in the village, in how you've changed these past days." "I haven't changed," she insisted, but the words rang hollow. They descended in silence, making steady progress toward the outpost. Twice they encountered native predators, massive 6-legged hunters with sensing filaments where eyes should be. Each time, Calix moved to eliminate the threat with lethal efficiency, then paused, instead finding ways to divert the creatures. She told herself it was merely to avoid attracting attention, but knew the truth was more complex. As dusk approached, they reached the outpost's perimeter. Security drones patrolled in predictable patterns, their sensors sweeping the surrounding area. "I'll go alone," Calix decided. "If something happens, you can escape back to the forest." "That's not the plan." "It is now," she turned to face him fully. "You've survived this long, that's impressive for a human." Eli recognized the awkward compliment for what it was. Was that almost respect, Commander? Before she could respond, her enhanced hearing picked up a transmission from within the outpost. She tilted her head, focusing. Confirmed sighting of Commander Calix, accompanied by the human prisoner. Consider her compromised and implement Protocol 7 immediately. Calix froze, her body suddenly rigid. "What is it?" Eli whispered. "Protocol 7, she replied, her voice hollow. "Kill on sight, no questions, no trial." Her golden eyes met his. "They've declared me a traitor." "Why would they?" They believe I've been compromised by human influence, she laughed bitterly. By you. Eli processed this. We need to move now. No, Calix straightened to her full height. I am a commander of the Zethnar Dominion. I will explain the tactical necessity of our alliance. Calix, they won't listen. They've already made their decision. Then I'll make them understand. Her hand moved to her weapon. I've never failed the Dominion. Sometimes loyalty has to be earned, Eli argued. If they'd turn on you this easily. A sudden high-pitched whine cut through the air. Calix's combat instincts took over as she tackled Eli to the ground. A heartbeat later, the spot where they'd been standing erupted in explosive force. Seeker drones, she hissed, pulling him behind a rocky outcrop as 3 more projectiles streaked overhead. They have our biosignatures. More explosions rocked the perimeter. Through the smoke, armored figures emerged from the outpost, elite Zethnar commandos in full battle gear. Commander Calix, a voice boomed across the clearing. By order of Supreme Commander Vexnara, you are deemed compromised by enemy influence and sentenced to immediate termination. Calix recognized the voice, Dren, her former lieutenant. She had personally trained him, promoted him, trusted him with her life in dozens of battles. I am not compromised, she called back. I survived the ambush and salvaged valuable intelligence. You were observed protecting humans during the raid on mining outpost Kappa 12, Dren replied. You've adopted their weakness. The human has altered your thinking. The village was a tactical decision, she countered, but even as she spoke, she recognized the partial truth in his accusation. Something had changed within her. Surrender the human and face judgment, Dren offered. Perhaps the council will show mercy considering your past service. Eli tensed beside her. Don't even think about it. Calix assessed their situation with cold precision. 6 commandos, all with weapons trained on their position. 3 seeker drones circling overhead. The forest at their backs offered the only escape route. What will you do? Eli asked quietly. They're your people. In that moment, images flashed through Calix's mind. The villagers they had saved, the grateful eyes of the children, the predators they had diverted rather than killed. Small mercies she would have once considered weaknesses, now feeling like something else entirely. The Dominion raised me from birth to be a perfect warrior, she said, her voice low. To believe strength comes only through domination, that mercy is weakness. And now, Calix looked at him, the human who had challenged everything she believed. Now I question. Her decision made, she reached for her combat gauntlet, but instead of activating its lethal functions, she adjusted it to emit a blinding pulse. When I give the signal, run for the forest. Don't stop, no matter what you hear. I'm not leaving you. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment they called you a traitor for showing compassion, Eli said firmly. We go together or not at all. Something shifted in Calix's chest, an unfamiliar warmth where cold calculation had always resided. Together then. With synchronized movement born from days of survival, they burst from cover. Calix's gauntlet discharged, temporarily blinding their pursuers as they sprinted for the tree line. Weapons fire erupted behind them, plasma bolts scorching the ground at their heels. A drone exploded overhead, showering them with debris. Eli stumbled as a bolt grazed his leg, but Calix caught him, her strength easily supporting his weight as they plunged into the forest's shadows. They'll hunt us, she stated, not slowing her pace despite Eli's injury. Both your people and mine now. Then we'll find new people, Eli replied through gritted teeth. As they disappeared into the wilderness, Calix felt the weight of her former life falling away. The certainty, the unquestioning obedience, the narrow definition of strength that had guided her for decades. In its place was something unfamiliar, doubt, possibility, and something dangerously close to freedom. I am a warrior without an empire, she realized aloud. No, Eli corrected, his eyes meeting hers with unwavering confidence. You're a warrior finding a better reason to fight. Behind them, the outpost's alarms continued to wail, signaling the beginning of a hunt that would force Calix to choose, once and for all, between the soldier she had been and the person she was becoming. The abandoned mining facility offered a temporary haven. Built into the side of a mountain, its reinforced walls and multiple exit tunnels made it defensible, but not a trap. Calix had selected it with the tactical precision that had once made her the Dominion's most feared commander. Eli's leg wound had begun to heal after 3 days of rest, though he still limped slightly as he joined Calix at the facility's observation post. Below them stretched a vast valley where patrols from both factions searched with increasing desperation. "The price on our heads has doubled," Calix informed him, lowering her scavenged binoculars. "We've become quite valuable." "I'm flattered," Eli replied with the dry humor that had somehow become familiar to her. "Though I preferred when only one army wanted me dead." Calix turned to study him, this human who had inadvertently transformed her. In the 2 weeks since fleeing the outpost, they had evaded capture through a combination of her combat skills and his unconventional thinking. Each close call had deepened a connection she once would have considered impossible. "We cannot run forever," she stated. "Eventually they will find us." "Or we could find them first," Eli suggested, "on our terms." Calix tilted her head, intrigued. "You propose an offensive." "I propose an ending." He met her gaze directly. "The Dominion believes you're compromised because you showed mercy. The Alliance thinks I'm a traitor for cooperating with you. Both sides are so convinced of their righteousness that they can't see what's happening." "And what is happening, Eli Bennett?" "The possibility of something better." He gestured to the valley below. "This war has raged for decades, each side convinced the other must be crushed for survival. But you and I, enemies by definition, have proven there's another way." "Cooperation for mutual survival is not peace," Calix countered, though without conviction. "It's a start." Eli stepped closer. "You once told me strength comes from domination. Is that still what you believe?" The question hung between them. Calix looked out at the world that had been her battlefield, remembering the unquestioning warrior she had been mere weeks ago. The Dominion had crafted her to be the perfect weapon, uncompromising, merciless, unstoppable. Yet here she stood, changed in ways she was only beginning to understand. "No," she admitted finally, "I believe differently now." Their conversation was interrupted by the facility's proximity alert. Calix moved with lightning reflexes to the surveillance system. On the screen, a Dominion command shuttle was landing in the valley below, accompanied by a full squadron of elite troops. "Vexnara," she identified the commanding figure who emerged from the shuttle. "The Supreme Commander herself. I must have truly disturbed them to warrant her personal attention." "Is that good or bad for us?" "It means they fear what I've become." Calix's expression hardened with resolve, "or perhaps what we represent together." They watched as Vexnara deployed her forces in a strategic pattern that Calix immediately recognized. Her own formation, one she had developed and taught to the elite units. "They're using my tactics against me," she observed with grim amusement. "Fitting." "What do we do?" Eli asked. Calix was silent for a long moment, the warrior in her calculating odds and outcomes while something newer, something Eli had awakened, considered possibilities beyond combat. "I will face them," she decided finally. "That's suicide." "Not necessarily." Her golden eyes gleamed with determination. "I know their tactics because they are mine, and I have learned new ways of thinking from you." "I'm coming with you," Eli stated, his tone brooking no argument. "I expected nothing less," she almost smiled. They prepared quickly, gathering what weapons remained and rigging the facility with the few explosives they had salvaged. Not enough to win a direct confrontation, but perhaps enough to control the terms of engagement. As they descended toward the valley, Calix paused, turning to Eli. "Whatever happens, know that you have taught me something I once thought impossible." "What's that?" "That true strength may lie not in what we destroy, but in what we refuse to sacrifice." She gestured between them. "In who we choose to protect." Eli's eyes widened slightly at this unprecedented admission. Before he could respond, Calix activated her communicator, broadcasting on the Dominion's command frequency. "Supreme Commander," she announced, her voice carrying the authority that had once commanded armadas. "This is Commander Calix. I request parley." A moment of silence followed before Vexnara's voice crackled through the speaker. "The traitor wishes to surrender." "I wish to speak, one warrior to another." "Your words are compromised by human sentiment," Vexnara replied dismissively. "You were once our greatest weapon, Calix. Now you are merely broken." Not broken, Calix countered. Evolved. She cut the transmission, nodding to Eli. Together, they continued their descent, emerging from the tree line into the open ground before the assembled Dominion forces. A calculated risk, but necessary for what would come next. Vexnara stood at the center of her troops, her massive form encased in ceremonial battle armor. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of Calix and Eli approaching side by side. "This is what you've become," she called out, "walking beside prey instead of hunting it." "I've learned there is more than one kind of strength," Calix replied, stopping at a distance just beyond weapons range. "More than one path to victory. There is only strength and weakness, dominion or submission." Vexnara gestured to her assembled forces. "And you are outnumbered 20-1. "Yet you brought only 20, Calix observed calmly, "against the warrior you once called unstoppable." Eli tensed beside her, sensing the strategy unfolding. He had learned to read her intentions with remarkable accuracy. "Your human will die first," Vexnara declared. "Then you will face judgment." "My name," Eli interjected, "is Eli Bennett, and I'm not her human, I'm her ally." The distinction seemed to confuse Vexnara momentarily, enough time for Calix to activate the remote detonator in her palm. The explosives they had planted around the perimeter detonated simultaneously, not aimed at the troops, but at the rocky ground beneath them, destabilizing formations and creating momentary chaos. What followed was unlike any battle Calix had ever fought. She moved with her legendary speed and precision, but her tactics had transformed. Where once she would have killed without hesitation, she now disabled when possible. Where she would have sought total dominance, she instead created openings for Eli's less lethal but surprisingly effective human combat techniques. They fought not as commander and prisoner, not as Zethnar and human, but as equals with complementary strengths. When Eli was cornered, Calix appeared at his side. When she was surrounded, his warning allowed her to adapt. Their movements became a deadly dance that flowed between them with unexpected harmony. Vexnara, enraged by this display, finally engaged Calix directly. Their combat was brutal and swift, the Supreme Commander's raw power against Calix's evolved technique. But where Vexnara fought with familiar Dominion ruthlessness, Calix fought with something new, purpose beyond victory, strength tempered by choice. "You fight differently," Vexnara observed, circling her former protege. "Weaker." "Not weaker," Calix replied, "wiser." With a move that combined Zethnar combat forms with a human disabling technique Eli had shown her, Calix breached the Supreme Commander's defenses. Rather than delivering a killing blow, she disabled Vexnara's neural implant, the source of her authority over the troops. As Vexnara fell to her knees, her neural connection to her forces severed, Calix addressed the assembled warriors. "I was raised to believe that strength meant domination at any cost," she declared, her voice carrying across the battlefield where troops on both sides had ceased fighting to witness this unprecedented moment. "That emotions were weakness and mercy was foolishness." She gestured to Eli, who stood bruised but unbowed beside her. "I was wrong. This human, this enemy, taught me that true strength sometimes means choosing not to destroy when you have the power to do so. That victory can mean finding a better way forward instead of annihilation." Murmurs spread through the ranks. Some raised weapons uncertainly, others simply watched, conflicted. "I will not return to the Dominion," Calix continued. "Nor will I join the Alliance. Instead, I choose a different path, one where strength is measured not by what I conquer, but by what I protect." She extended her hand to Vexnara, a gesture no Zethnar warrior had ever offered a defeated opponent. "The war between our peoples will end someday. It must. When that day comes, remember this moment. Remember that an unstoppable force can choose to stop." Vexnara did not take her hand, but neither did she order her troops to fire. Something in Calix's transformation had created doubt where certainty once reigned, a small crack in the foundation of hate that had fueled the conflict for generations. That night, as Calix and Eli slipped away during the confusion of a hastily arranged ceasefire, they stood together on a ridge overlooking the valley where something momentous had occurred. Not a victory in the traditional sense, but perhaps the beginning of something more important. "Where will you go now?" Eli asked. Calix corrected him. "Where will we go, unless you wish to return to your people?" "My place is with you," he said simply, "at least until we figure out this new path." Calix looked at the stars, the same stars she had once navigated as a conqueror, now appearing somehow different. There are neutral worlds beyond the conflict zones, places where ideas like ours might take root. A warrior and a human changing the galaxy, Eli smiled. Sounds impossible. So was this, Calix replied, gesturing between them. Yet here we stand. As they departed toward an uncertain future, Commander Calix, once the most feared warrior in the Zethnar Dominion, carried with her not just the combat skills that had made her legendary, but something far more powerful. The capacity to change, to choose, and to see strength in places she had once perceived only weakness. The lessons of a human who had dared to defy her had transformed her forever. Whatever came next, she would never be the same again.